I asked you guys over on my YouTube community post to drop a bunch of questions, and that's what you guys did. So that's where we're getting all of these questions from. Let's have some fun and see what you guys asked. I have not looked at any of these questions ahead of time, so you're gonna get some raw, real responses. The first question comes in from Juicebox. It is, any tips for my first locals? And I would say know what your cards are for your deck so that you don't scramble and take forever on your turns, because that's probably one of the biggest complaints a lot of players have when it comes to newer players. It's just players not knowing how to use their own deck that they're playing. Be comfortable with your deck. You can play on your phone, play on your computer before going to locals. If you want to explain to your opponent before the game starts that it's your first event or you're new to the game, absolutely do so. They'll be more lenient, and maybe if you're going to like a free week, they might let you take it back and misplay or two, but don't expect that. Yu Young asked the next question. It is, any tips for your first regionals at US, and what deck should I play as well for the current meta? For your first ever regional, make sure you get a lot of sleep. Make sure you have some snacks with you too, because lunch breaks are not guaranteed. And if you want more in-depth regional and tournament tips, I'll have a video linked down below or as a pop-up card at the end that you can click and watch. I already have a lengthy guide video explaining all sorts of different Pokemon card tournaments and also tips for Pokemon tournaments as well. It's like a two video series. And then what deck should you play for the current meta? Well, I would start by recommending the best deck in format, which is Charizard. And if you don't want to play the best deck in format, at least know the deck that you're playing and try and build it in a way where you can answer the top 3 decks, or at least have a game plan going into those matchups. Lameboy5238 asks, I'm building Arceus Gudra. Should I play Prime Catcher or Hero's Cape? Great question. That really comes down to the rest of the build that you have for your deck. I would personally say Prime Catcher is usually like the go-to ace spec that a lot of decks are going to want to run. Just being able to switch out your Pokemon and then also gust up the Pokemon you want to attack is insanely strong. Think about all those times that you wanted to use boss's orders on an opponent, but you also needed to play a draw supporter per turn. Prime Catcher allows you to basically do just that, which is really handy. Gudra already is a built-in tank, so Hero's Cape might not be necessary. However, if you are building a particular type of Gudra deck that is very tanky, maybe you have some healing cards in your deck as well, maybe you have ways to, maybe you're gonna like use cards like Roseanne's backup to reuse the Hero's Cape later into the game. There's different ways you can go about building, but I would personally recommend Prime Catcher. That is the safest go-to ace spec for pretty much any deck if you are building a deck from scratch. OP Predator 7905 asks, where you can see all the deck list? Well, I post a lot of deck lists on my Instagram and on my Twitter at SneakerTalk TCG and SneakerTalk CA. However, if you guys want to see some good deck lists, I would recommend you check out the website called Limitless. Limitless is a website that compiles all of the tournaments online and major events as well, and even a bunch of the like City League, which is kind of just like a giant Pokemon League Cup in Japan, all on one website. You can see what's working, you can see what's not, you can clearly see what the best decks are from each major event. So if you want to take inspiration from those lists and apply them to your own, that is the like go-to website. It's a go-to tool that pretty much anyone who plays Pokemon at a competitive level or even semi-competitive level will use. And no shame in net decking. If you want to go ahead and take a list from the top 8 of a recent regional, that is a really great strategy to do, because those decks are well optimized. They have been through the gauntlet, they've been heavily tested, they're at those placements for a reason. Edril Jaeger _ asks, any recommendations for support attacker along with Meowscarada EX and Scratching Nails? Doesn't have that firepower if matched up against meta decks. Yeah, so Meowscarada has a pretty lackluster attack if there is no extra damage on the Pokemon that it's swinging into. 80 is not that good at all, so it is definitely kind of like lacking those big 1-8 KO options, but again, that's also not the main point of the deck. It is a spread style of deck. But great Pokemon you might want to include in it would probably be Iron Leaves. Iron Leaves is very strong. If you have energies on the board already, you get to do some big damage, and also if your Meowscarada was injured previously, it does get to basically switch out for free, because the Iron Leaves will, when it gets played down, moves into the active and takes the energies on the board. There's also great attackers too, like Shaymin I would recommend, because it is a really cheap attack cost. Those are a couple that really come to mind right out the get-go. Random Noob 9141 asks, question for the Q&A. When is the Meowscarada deck list coming? I didn't see anything this past Meowscarada Monday. So this past Monday I was actually I was in Orlando, Florida. I came back from Orlando, Florida like a day later than I expected to, which was not fun at all. I even spent like 5 hours in the Ottawa airport for layover while I was just editing and compiling and researching for future videos. So you guys can expect the top 10 meta decks and the top 10 rogue decks videos dropping probably tomorrow or over this weekend. And we're going to start Meowscarada Mondays this coming Monday. So stay tuned for that if you want to see some fun Meowscarada lists. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to start off the series. I have some ideas in mind, but yeah, I actually did play Meowscarada EX last night at locals at Banana Games. Diaz asks, are you going to regionals in Indianapolis, Indiana? Would love to play against you. Yes, I will be there. I'm going to be doing a fun road trip with a couple of my friends. So yeah, hopefully we'll catch you guys there. And hopefully I can remember to bring a Sharpie so I can sign Miraidons and sign playmats. Because I feel bad when people ask me for like autographs and stuff like that and I don't have a Sharpie and then they don't have a Sharpie and I'm just like, well, I'll be at Indianapolis. I don't know if I'll be able to play against subscribers and stuff, but if I have some time to, I absolutely will. Next question comes from the retired Mew Menace Young Big Mac. It is, will you ever join the side of the best deck in format and play Lugia VSTAR? Honestly, I have no idea. I don't really want to play Lugia VSTAR. I actually traded in my Lugia VSTAR cards like over a year ago because I have no intentions of ever playing Lugia. But hey, if Lugia ends up being the busted deck that it could be again, like it was when the amazing rare Pokemon were out there and Lugia was the best deck in format for quite some time, like the tier 0 deck, like the way Charizard is right now, I might join Lugia. QTips9969 asks, what do you think Meowscarada needs to be one of the best decks in format? Great question, and I think I have a unorthodox answer for you here. I think it needs a lot more top players playing it so we can refine the list better and find out what the best consistent way is to play it. Because right now, there's not a lot of players that are, you know, high level, top level, that are playing it, that are giving it love. And so it's harder to find that, you know, perfect 60 card list that we needed to have to consistently do well and perform at tournaments. That is one of the big things that is slacking. It's basically just chefs and cooks in the kitchen. Charizard has so many great things going for it, and there's so many top players playing it as well. It also won like 5 of the last regionals or major events. So being able to get that refined, really good 60 is way easier to do when there's a lot more people working on the same list or on the same archetype. Cohen Stunts 6994 asks, what drives you to play Pokemon? A very deep question. Always is interesting though. So what drives me to play Pokemon? Well, I love playing Pokemon. It's a lot of fun. I'm a very, very competitive person. I love being able to improve at particular things, including games. It also pays off big time because I am a full-time content creator. So going to events, win or lose, I'm gonna try and make some content out of it, so it's always gonna be a fun and useful and what's the proper word, productive way to spend my time going to tournaments. And even if I'm not vlogging the tournaments, still just trying to improve is always useful. And you know, everybody's going through certain things. It's just nice to be able to hang out with friends, kind of decompress from real life, so to speak, and distract yourself from certain things that are going on behind the scenes. I know Pokemon is definitely a outlet that a lot of people like to use for self-expression and just as a stress relief outlet, to have some fun, you know? People play video games, people play sports, some people play Pokemon, and some people do it all. So that's probably the best answer I could give you. User T33Ek4G asks, is it legal to card count in Pokemon or any TCG game? Or is it legal but too hard for anyone to card count? So I don't know necessarily what you mean by card count, but you can count the cards in your opponent's hand. They can count yours. You can count the amount of cards in their discard pile. You can count the amount of cards in their deck. Getting knowledge on the board state is not a crime in any way compared to, I believe, like things like poker where you're like gambling and you're card counting. I think that's like a thing. Is that a thing? Is it cheating? So say, you know, like your opponent has 4 cards in hand and you know they have 2 cards in particular. If you can keep track of those cards that are in their hand, they use those, then you'll know those 2 other cards are like mystery cards. So if you're able to card count, if that's the proper term, then absolutely card count. It helps you out a ton. Just being able, it's basically a skill that you can practice, knowing what's available, what resources are available, especially in a best 2 out of 3 set. If you can try and figure out how many copies of a particular card your opponent has in their deck, you can use that to your advantage. So if you know, for example, a opponent is playing a deck that has two to three copies of Boss's Orders, but you're not exactly sure how many they have, sometimes it's worth playing out a long game one if you know you have a lot of time, or just play out the games so you can try and get more deck knowledge, so you can try and have more knowledge and have a better game plan going into the future games against that same player. WXO Ted asks, thoughts on Shaymin V and VSTAR as secondary attackers plus Sealstone targets in Meowscarada EX deck. Been running a 1/1 for a while, and it seems to help with consistency plus a one-shot high HP late game. So yeah, Shaymin V and VSTAR are some Pokemon I would definitely recommend experimenting with for Meowscarada. The attacks are quite strong, quite cheap. You also don't really have a VSTAR ability in certain decks. I don't know if you'll use the Shaymin VSTAR ability, but having it as a Forest Heal Stone target, as you mentioned, is a very, very handy thing, since if you're not playing Arceus, then you don't really have a VSTAR power. If you're playing Lumineon, you may as well play one Seal Stone as well to take advantage of the Lumineon V being in your deck, because you're going to have access to Arven most likely, and that is a Forest Heal Stone is a really good tool to have in your deck, especially if you have Arven to just search it out. I would say I am a Shaymin believer, and you can also just potentially get away with not even playing Shaymin VSTAR. I believe like Revenge Blast attack is the same for both of the Pokemon, but the VSTAR does slightly more base damage or something like that. Some other V Pokemon to look into if you are playing Meowscarada would have to be Hisuian Lilligant V and VSTAR. That card is really cracked, along with Superior V and VSTAR. Those are another one as well that I've been experimenting with. The Shiny Palmot asks, I'm trying to start playing. What's a good way I can get a deck and stuff under $50? Alright, great news. I've said this time and time again, but Pokemon is the cheapest card game you can get into out there, especially at a competitive level. One really cool thing that the Limitless website that I mentioned earlier has is that it actually also can show you the approximate price point of particular decks when you actually look at the deck lists themselves. Some decks are more expensive than others. That just comes with the nature of certain cards being harder to pull out of packs, and so that's where the prices go up. It also has to deal with supply and demand. But if you're looking for cheaper decks that are like sub 50, for example, I would highly recommend those single prize decks that are really good. A couple really good decks that are like sub 50 US dollars would have to be Ancient Box, which got, I believe, second place at the Orlando Regionals. It's just like full of single prize attackers, which is basically like bulk Pokemon cards from the latest set, Temporal Forces. There's other great decks too that have been around enough and been around long enough that have been reprinted a few times. So decks like Gardevoir are now really, really cheap and accessible. Miraidon decks are very cheap and accessible too. Check out Limitless, and maybe we do a top 10 budget decks. If you guys want to see the best decks under $50, maybe we can do that as a once a month series. If this video gets 500 likes, let's do it up. Year of Shorty asks, what do you prefer playing, rogue decks or meta? And honestly, I don't really think I have a preference, so to speak. I just like playing particular decks that do certain things. I find myself playing rogue decks more than meta decks. I think I'd say that. I was playing Miraidon when it was rogue. I was playing it when it was not rogue. I was playing it when it's rogue again, like right now. And I like playing decks like Blastoise and Meowscarada and Gengar and Alakazam, which none of those are really meta by any means. One deck I really want to play, I have 3 Pokemon League Cups this weekend. I think I'm going to play Espathra EX for a bunch of those. That deck is definitely a rogue deck. So you could say I prefer rogue decks, I think. If you're gonna hold me to it, we're gonna go with rogue decks. Blue Falcon Pokepro asks, if you weren't a YouTuber / content creator, what would you be doing for a living? Well, I would probably be just like on the news or on a TV program of some sort, or a TV host somewhere, because I went to school for broadcast journalism. I've been a YouTuber for 15 years. Other than that, I also really enjoy working with children, and I also like teaching. Maybe there's a timeline where I'm potentially like a teacher as well. But I also am very business savvy. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been just doing entrepreneurial endeavors my entire life, ever since I was like 11, 12 years old. And so I would just probably be a business owner in some way, shape, or form. Juan Vargas Arts asks, do you think Iron Leaves would be a good closing card to the Meowscarada EX deck? Been building on this deck and doing some experimenting. Yes, I am a big believer of Iron Leaves. I think it's a really solid inclusion. Next question comes in from Spoons. What are your thoughts on the new Drakloak, and do you think it will be the return of Pidgeotto control? Ooh, that's really hard to say. So there's a new Drakloak coming out soon that's going to also release with a Dragapult. The ability it has is once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand, put the other card on the bottom of your deck. That is a really busted ability, and I could definitely see it doing really well in some control style decks. Enderben102 asks, is YouTube / Pokemon trading card game your job, or do you just do it as a hobby? Yes, it is a job. It's also a hobby. You could say it's a lifestyle. Cosmu39_ asks, what would be one new card that would allow Miraidon to be a top 10 deck again? That would be the return of Dynamotor Flaffy. Nightlight Oasis asks, are you hoping to attend more overseas tournaments next season? That's a really great question, and absolutely, it's definitely something I want to do more of. I want to try and sync up some travels for my sneaker related content to also time well with Pokemon regional events. I really love the Philippines, I really love Singapore, and I really love Japan. So if I can time certain trips to sync up with going to regionals in the Philippines, although I don't get any championship points, it would basically just be going to play in the Philippines for prize money and for fun, essentially. Singapore too, it would just be for prize money and for fun. I say Japan, I probably wouldn't be able to play in their circuits. However, Japan's very close to Australia, and the Australia events are super small. Australia is one of the most expensive countries in the world to fly to, especially from Canada. So if I'm already in Japan, the flights are going to be much cheaper, which means I'll have access to those smaller events, which means I have a better chance at doing well as well. Now, I'd also like to attend more events in places like Europe, which would also contribute to the championship points for the next season, and just other events in North America. And 6843 asks, do you think A-Specs are a good addition to the TCG? Some of them are quite pricey and make the game more luck-based. So, I think A-Specs are a fantastic and amazing addition to the TCG, especially because we're stepping away from VSTAR Pokemon and we're going more into EX style of decks. So with VSTAR powers, basically they're going to be slowly rotated out of format. The A-Specs will be the big cool powerful card that each deck is going to be able to utilize. I wouldn't say it makes the game more luck based. I actually would say it makes the game more skill based, because when it comes to deck building, you'll be able to build your deck with the A-Spec in mind, or build your deck basically around the A-Spec. So it's going to definitely reward a lot of deck builders. It's going to allow a lot more skill expression to happen in the game. With it being pricey, it's honestly not that pricey. If you compare it to previous generations of the game, where cards like Tapu Lele GX was $35 or $40, and then also if you just play the game at all, you would know that when the new sets come out, typically the hot new shiny card, like that shiny new Pokemon, is usually $30 to $40 for one copy. Right now, Prime Catcher, I believe, is $35 US, something like that, but it's for one card, and that one card you're actually able to use in a ton of different decks, right? Prime Catcher can be used in every deck in the game, but if you wanted to play Arceus V-Star or Mew VMAX, those were $30 and $40 cards you needed 3 or 4 copies of, and you could only use those pretty much for that particular deck. Arceus, of course, being more flexible, I don't think it makes the game more luck-based. I don't really see the argument there. Frostbite7548 asks, Dragapult is one of my favorite Pokemon. I really want to use it when the EX comes out. Do you think it will be at all viable? Yeah, I think it's going to be viable. I think it has really great synergy for Lost Box decks, or Lost Piles. I believe the attack that Dragapult EX uses is 1 Fire and 1 Psychic. So I could imagine a world where combining that card with a Radiant Charizard Sableye type of deck could be really good, since you're going to be using fire and psychic energies already. So there's some pretty good chemistry right there. It's going to be cool to see how people build those decks. But typically with these dragon type decks, like Gudra or Giratina, these are the decks that have been able to really benefit from the Lost Zone engine, because Mirage Gate, being able to grab 2 different basic energies at the same time and attaching them, is very strong. It might be one of those decks that honestly just doesn't get a lot of love in terms of the player fan base playing it, or the player base playing it. We might not see a refined or really good list, a really good consistent list, or a best way to play it, so to speak, for a couple of weeks. So it's definitely one of the decks I want to cook up. I'm a big big fan of Dragapult, and I didn't really get to play Dragapult VMAX at its peak when it was one of the best decks. Dragapult VMAX was one of the best decks for a while during the Rebel Clash format. So hopefully we can cook some Dragapult. That sounds funny. Cook some Dragapult. Dante415 asks or says, since watching your videos a few weeks ago, my son and I have been playing a lot of Pokemon Trading Card Game Live a lot. Never knew how fun the game actually is compared to collecting them. Hey, heck yeah. Glad to hear that, Dante. I'm glad that you and your son are also able to bond over Pokemon. I'm sure that's a really fun thing you guys get to do. Pokemon is something that's very important to me, and so I'm hoping maybe one day I'll get my dad to learn how to play the game. I did buy the Battle Academy, so I intend to teach him at some point. Time of Farkas asks, do you build decks from scratch? If yes, what is your go-to advice for starting out? Yes, I do build decks from scratch, but I also build decks like semi from scratch. The number one thing I would recommend is basically take inspiration from other decks that you've worked with in the past or other decks that you have seen, and then basically apply those the foundations of those decks to the decks that you want to build. So whether it be a particular engine, let's say the Babero engine for your draw engine, or it could be the Dunsparce engine for your draw engine, or maybe you have a stage 2 deck that can really benefit from like a couple Pidgeys and a couple Pidgeots, so those rare candies can get used for your attackers or for your Pidgeots as well. And I mentioned this in the last Q&A, so I don't want to sound too redundant. Look at the Pokemon you want to play, look at the supporters that best kind of support that Pokemon in a sense of like getting those Pokemon to do what they want to do the best way they can. And of course, look at the tools. There's a lot of tools and a lot of stadiums that can really benefit particular decks. So look at the stadiums, maybe 1 or 2 stadiums could really help your deck out. And then of course the energies as well. But if you are also building decks from scratch, do keep in mind that you're doing it on hard mode. It's going to be a little harder to find that more consistent really good deck. And talking about consistency, focus on consistency. Consistency is the most important thing in the Pokemon game, because you have to find a balance between power level and consistency. If you tech out your deck and include lots of really cool, great cards that are like 1-offs and 2-offs, but you're not playing the game because you're not setting up your board state with Pokemon like you want to attack with, or your support Pokemon, all those really great cards mean nothing if you're not going to be ending up playing the game. Try and build a sort of max consistency style of list with a lot of copies of like 3-ofs and 4-ofs, and then tech your deck out accordingly based off of the meta. Maybe focus on weak points of your deck, or focus on targeting particular decks as well to sort of secure or lock in particular matchups. Not Nate327. It is, hi, I love your content and watching your vlogs. My questions are, would you / are you planning on doing deck profile type videos explaining choices on why you play specific cards, and what decks do you think deserve more of the spotlight? Thanks again. So to answer your first question, yes, we are going to be getting into a lot more deck profile content. While I'm filming this video right now, I'm actually uploading an Alakazam EX deck profile video, and I talk about the card counts and all that stuff in heavy detail. We're talking about like 25-minute videos with 0 gameplay, just talking about the theory of the deck, why I did what I did, particular matchups and things to look out for, lines of play that come up and lines of plays that you will want to be scared of, that kind of stuff. And then I'll also do some gameplay stuff too. So we might do like a 2-part kind of thing where I upload the deck profile and the analysis of the deck first, and then the next day we do a gameplay. Like I'll cover the same deck that I just profiled and then do gameplay. There might be a style where I just do the deck profile for like 2 or 3 minutes and then just hop right into the gameplay. I have to find out what kind of style works best for my channel and what style works best for you guys, the audience, right? So yeah, we'll figure things out one video at a time. To answer your second question, what decks do you think deserve more of the spotlight? I would say, well, stay tuned for my top 10 anti-meta or rogue deck video dropping soon. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Oh yeah, drop some questions for the next one if you want to be in that video too. All right, peace.